On average, 1 in 4 employees experiencing symptoms of burnout.
A sense of complete exhaustion, right? So on a physical, mental, social, spiritual level.
I was always looking for a fast fix. And that was the biggest lesson I learned, was there was no fast fix.
And we don't do that to ourselves. We just run. We're not machines, we're human.
Welcome to the She Word, Women in Business, conversations that women rarely have but really should. I'm your host, Helen Chorley, investment banker turned angel investor, and this is the all-new series of Women in Business. So whether you are an employee, a boss, an entrepreneur, you work from home, there will be something in this series that resonates with you, and we have some fantastic episodes coming up, including today's topic of burnout, which is something that is very personal to me, to my story, to my journey, and I can't wait. We have some great experts for you today. But before we do that, if you are an existing She Word fan, thank you. Thank you for subscribing. Thank you for sharing these episodes. And if you are new here, welcome. Please do yourselves a favor, do us a favor, so that you don't miss any content. Subscribe across all our channels, Spotify, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube, of course. The button is here. And also, if you are a Patreon subscriber, a very special thank you to you. You are making a difference to the lives of women who need guidance and support through our partnership with the Richmond Foundation. And of course, you are seeing this before anybody else. So let's dive into today's topic, burnout. I think this will be a really far-reaching episode today because so many women are suffering in silence and have reached out about this topic. And we have 3 fascinating guests who know about this firsthand. So let's introduce them. Our first guest is an independent brand consultant specializing in upscale lifestyle offerings and has over 20 years worth of global hospitality marketing experience. She is very passionate about regenerative health and teaches meditation in her spare time. Welcome, Vanessa Colerio.
Thank you.
My next guest is a psychologist, leadership coach, and HR business consultant with an unrelenting energy to help individuals, teams, and organizations move forward to reach their goals. She is passionate about change management and supporting leaders to build high-performance cultures. Fueling this drive is her deep interest in how human beings live, work, and create meaningful, fulfilling lives. And I so share that. Welcome, Dr. Elaine Dutton.
Thank you very much for having me.
Glad to have you here. And our third guest is currently an emerging markets consultant. Ashmi is focused on supporting and coaching women both professionally and personally as they embark on significant transitions in their life, which burnout can be one. She has spent the last 16 years climbing the corporate ladder in gaming and fintech. And she's concurrently enrolled in an MBA. Welcome, Ashmi Ahluwalia.
Thank you so much, Helen.
A McKinsey survey of nearly 15,000 employees and 1,000 HR decision makers in 15 countries reported on average 1 in 4 employees experiencing symptoms of burnout. McKinsey's annual Women in the Workplace report indicates that women experience burnout symptoms at higher rates than men, and that, sadly, that's only getting worse. The 2022 report showed that the burnout gap between women and men is almost double what it was the previous year, with 42% of women reporting feeling burned out. But at the same time, productivity across corporate America was at an all-time high. This means that many of the women who are experiencing burnout symptoms may be in work environments where they are struggling. Microsoft had similar results. They polled 20,000 people in 11 countries around the globe and found that almost 50% of employees and 53% of managers said they were burnt out at work. But there is hope. Research has found that many individuals with short-term stress recover within a few months. However, in severe cases of burnout, recovery can take longer than a year. And that's certainly something that's changed and shaped my own personal journey and our guests today. So we're going to dive into that and hear about your personal experiences. But Elaine, let me come to you first. Let's define, what is burnout? Is there a definitive definition of it?
Burnout is typically characterized by a sense of complete exhaustion, right? So on a physical, mental, social, spiritual level. Right? It's like when a person feels completely depleted. It's not really a health diagnosis. So if you look at the WHO, they do not really recognize it as being a health condition, right? So there's no epidemiological data about it. You won't find really, it's not like when they keep the statistics for diabetes, for example, right? It's not a health condition in that sense, but it's recognized as being a condition typically created because of our workplaces, or at least the conflict that gets created between what we want to do with our life, with our energy, and what happens at the place of work, right? So
and it's a bit more than just feeling tired, isn't it?
Definitely.
There's degrees of this.
Yes. So people can experience, a sense of stress typically results from having a sense that your resources, your ability to deal with what is confronting you, it's going beyond that. So essentially, stress is a perception that we feel, right? Because there could be different situations and different people can react differently. Okay, so if I feel that my ability to deal with a situation is not enough, I cannot cope with what is coming in front of me, then I'm going to feel stressed. Now, we're not just talking about stress here, though, and it's not just an acute phase. So in a small moment, it might there might be something that passes, and I can go through it. And we know that in the past, people suffered more through acute stress,
right?
Situations which were in short term, definite periods. It starts and it ends.
Yeah.
Now people are going through more chronic kind of stress, where the stress that you're experiencing, that sense of being overwhelmed, that sense of feeling that you're not coping, that your internal resources are not enough, this seems to be going for longer and longer, and we just plod on. Yeah. We're good soldiers, right? So we just continue dealing with our families, dealing with whatever needs to happen, and then everything gets on top of it, right? But we just still continue showing up at work, and this sense of chronic stress eventually, when you're not really recuperating, it can lead to burnout, and it often does.
Yeah, and I'd really like to explore whether it's a personality type. Does this affect specific people, or is it an environment, or is it a combination of both? But Vanessa, let me come to you first. What's your story on this?
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this is a subject very close to my heart. And my story began in the pinnacle of my career, in my most kind of important part of the work that I was doing. And I just woke up one morning in the darkest of places. I mean, I don't think I've ever fathomed that I could feel this way. And I get a bit emotional going back to that place. I thought I was going to die, literally. It was a dark tunnel. I had no energy, no life force going through me. I was completely and utterly depleted, mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so, my sort of workhorse warrior woman kicked in, and I was like, oh, I could do this, I've got people depending on me. I've got stuff to do, It was like a really important day also of productivity. So I said, I'll just go to the spa and I'll just sort of ask for maybe some acupuncture. That should get me going. So I literally crawled my way out of bed, got dressed, went down to the spa, and I was like, I need acupuncture. And she was like, well, I don't have an acupuncturist available. She was like, what I can do is I can fit you in to see the naturopath. And I said, oh God, that's going to take 2 hours to explain how I'm feeling. And I said, okay, I had no choice. So as soon as I sat down in front of the naturopath and I said the first sentence, she just looked at me and she said, you have adrenal fatigue. And I was like, adrenal what?
Wow.
So I didn't even know I had adrenal glands at that point in my life. But that was the beginning of the next very, very long journey of amazing learning. And I think it was a journey into returning home, coming into myself, coming into the present, and finding out who I really was.
So Ashmi, Vanessa has said a lot that I personally resonate. Was there stuff in there that you resonate with too?
It happened to me in October 2022, where I was probably at the height of my career in gaming. I was a global brand lead for a project which, was in multiple countries, worked with many teams. Things kept coming up on my table, things that were not in my job description. And a lot of people were fired. There were a lot of redundancies, and I seemed to, I ended up being the scapegoat. Essentially, I woke up one morning and I just knew that I couldn't do it anymore, and I could not open my laptop. Burnout is not a work condition, it's a life condition, and it affects your brain and your body and your emotions, and it really creeps up on you. It slowly builds up over a lot of time, and unless you see the warning signs, you just get into shutdown and you have no option but to address it. And that's what happened to me. And I'm still recovering, it's been more than a year. It's been a year and a half. It's changed the trajectory of my corporate career, my path. I'm much happier doing the kind of things I do now. It's, they're more on my terms, and it's helped me find soul work that resonates with my being. But it's been quite the journey.
Absolutely. And Elaine, what are those signs? If people are listening or watching at home and they are feeling tired, it's been going on for a while, how do they know if they are heading for this? What are those signs for them to look out for?
I think this is really important. I think both what Ashmi and Vanessa were saying, it doesn't, although there comes a point where it's like the hair that breaks the camel's back, the reality is that there isn't one day where you're okay and the next day you're burnt out. As Ashmi said, it does creep up on you, right? But there would have been signs before. So when Ashmi said things kept being piled on and you feel like the sense of obligation that you need to tick them off, perhaps certain signs that you would have noticed would be like you start losing a little bit of your sense of humor. This happens typically early on, even when we're starting to get quite in that phase of stress, where people come and tell you a joke, for example, people come to joke with you and you don't really feel like it. Whereas usually you might have been a very social, bubbly person and suddenly you just don't feel like dealing with that.
Yeah.
And perhaps you don't really think about it. You just say, they don't realize how much I've got on my plate. I don't want to deal with this right now. But this sense of snappiness, this type of character change within you, that should already be a telltale sign. Yeah. Especially if it's not just a day, you're not just having one day off, when you're not yourself. This is happening regularly, where you don't really feel like having a break with the rest of your colleagues because you've got too much on your plate. You don't feel like joking because there are more serious stuff going on. You start also noticing physical changes. You start feeling a bit more on edge. The coffee doesn't cut it anymore. Or on the contrary, you start feeling like you cannot actually go to sleep because the level of hormones, the level of cortisol going on in your system interrupts and disrupts your sleep patterns, your eating patterns. Maybe some people start feeling heartburn, for example. So even physically, not everyone feels it in the same way though. And this is the thing, right? So for example, for me, when I start feeling, and when I've been through chronic phases of stress, it starts affecting my gut, for example.
Yeah.
But some people start feeling it more in the tension around their shoulders or in the tension around their head. They start having more regular headaches, which could be attributed also to that level of chronic stress. So you really need to know a bit about your body and realize what have I been experiencing and what would happen if I had to change, something in my environment. But obviously, if you've been down the route of very chronic stress, you don't just, as Vanessa said, you don't do one session at the acupuncturist and suddenly you're okay, right?
And also what Vanessa said, it's that slow creep.
Exactly.
And as you said, it's not one day to the next. You don't wake up and go, oh my God, I'm burned out. But when you look back, you can see that build up. And also something that you said in there that is really valuable is it's different for every person, which I guess makes it sometimes harder to diagnose or recognize that you're on that path, because it might express physically, like you say, gut issues for one person. It might manifest in migraines or that way for a different person. It's very individual.
What if you could start your journey over? Start here and start again there. That's how life works, in a circular way. We understand the importance of circles, and that's why you are at the heart of ours. Find your way to wellness with Browns.
We are curators of culinary excellence. We stock all your favorite eateries with the finest ingredients and complement the best dishes with wines and spirits of distinction. We provide all the brands you love that you never knew you loved. Because the little things in life are the big things. Abraham's, for that something special.
How did it show up for you, Vanessa? What were the signs? And did you realize it at the time, or you realized it more looking back?
I think the most important lesson in retrospect was that I viewed it all as kind of signs of weakness. So this is really the important lesson. And how present are we really in our bodies? This is probably the most mental era that has ever existed in the history of mankind. We live in our minds, and very often we're completely disregarding what's going on in our bodies, in our emotional centers, in our hearts even. So I find that, when I look back, there were so many alarm bells, and this is how sickness or disease occurs. It starts showing up in all kinds of symptoms, and the alarm bell just starts ringing louder and louder and louder until it actually brings you to your knees, and it stops you in your track. Because if you don't pay attention at that point, then, it's going to be dangerous for you, for your existence even.
And it goes back to the point that we were going to go down, that is it the type of person, is there a specific personality type that will ignore those alarm bells? Like you say, you can see them in retrospect, but maybe when it's happening to you, you don't necessarily hear them, or you're the type that will just be like, push it aside. And to use your words, Vanessa, you just push on. You just get on with it. You just get through it.
Yeah. There are some personality types that might be more prone to that. In psychology, for example, we refer to the type A personality, which is typically the high achiever kind of personality. You see it in people who are highly productive, aim high, very ambitious, maybe slightly perfectionistic as well, wanting things to be, at a level of standard, really not giving themselves much slack, right? Sort of this idea that you push on, you persevere, and because that's what you also expect out of yourself. So there's sort of self-expectation as well. But let's not imagine that this is just a personality issue, right? It also combines itself with the environment you're in, the support system that you find, the people around you who perhaps alert you. I've been lucky sometimes to be surrounded also by fellow managers or fellow leaders who would say, I think you might need some rest. And to have people around you who recognize that is actually brilliant. Whereas other people with the same personality type might be around people who actually tell them to push on, that you're weak, that, you should know better. So it also depends a little bit about the people you're surrounded with and the environments that you're working in as well.
And you talk about support, but it can be exacerbated by the lack of support as well. If I can just share from you talk about, friends looking after you. That's how I changed what I did. It's how I got alerted. 2 of my friends took me aside at a dinner party and said, if you carry on this way, you are going to kill yourself. And when 2 people who care about you that much will be brave enough to have that conversation with you in a social setting, you listen.
Yeah.
But it took that. Yes. And so I so resonate with what you said about ignoring those alarm bells. What do you think those alarm bells were for you, Ashmi?
I think for me, it was a huge feeling of disconnection, really. It was, it became very task-oriented, I mean, I was just not emotionally feeling invested in the work that I was doing. But there were other niggly signs, we talked about gut health. Yeah. I felt that, my stomach was all over the place. Friends were telling me I was maybe not being very present. I was maybe on my phone a lot. And there's a lot of really small signs, and I think it's specific to each person.
Yeah. The other mentally, like you said, yes. Vanessa, we're in our heads a lot. Right?
We're in our heads. And I think the tricky thing about burnout is that it shows up differently in each person. So nobody can really diagnose it. And it's only today, like 1.5 years later, really joining the dots that I know what happened to me is burnout. And people would say, it's okay, work is just stressful, like take a break, go on a holiday, go to Italy, you'll sort it out, do some meditation. Quick fixes don't work, they absolutely... They can't do the work.
And you've raised something really important there, is about identifying it and almost like that self-diagnosis. I know for you, Vanessa, and I had the experience too, that I went for all the health tests. I went for how your adrenals are doing. I went for what do your hormones look like. And I was the picture of health on a test front. You had the same experience.
And thousands of euros later, spent so much money because I was always looking for a fast fix. And that was the biggest lesson I learned, was there was no fast fix. And, I had to go through a whole series of different experts in the field. And one thing that they all had, the common advice was slow down. Slow down. So I had people I worked with to look at the diet and the nutrition, others the sleep, others all the vitamins and supplements. But really and truly, it was taking my life back into my hands and learning all about self-love, because that is one thing that I realized I didn't have enough self-love, right? So what happens is, when you're in the sort of that high-powered environment and, you always come up against some kind of opposition or criticism. And then if you don't have enough self-love, you actually start to believe, right, what is being said about you or to you, whatever. So that's when then the imposter syndrome comes in and the stress starts just multiplying and multiplying. So yes, self-love was a big one for me, and it was actually the most beautiful, change, because the burnout broke through the ego, and really split my heart open. And only when it was kind of broken did it start to open and grow. And I started to have so much love and compassion for everybody else, but also for myself. So it was this vulnerability and this extreme fragility that started really kind of bringing out this new sense of life, of essence, and of, beauty within myself.
Oh, I definitely want to go into the gifts and the learnings from the opportunity. But first, Elaine, you talk about kind of losing the sense of humor, and we've heard from both ladies about this self-blame, this self-judgment. It's perceived as a weakness. Can that losing your sense of humor and being hard on yourself, can you notice that like as a sign that starts to impact the way you talk to yourself? So you are maybe harsher, and that...
to yourself and to others sometimes as well. So when Ashmi was saying about the emotional bluntness, that's another telltale sign, for example. The sense of almost of depersonalization. Like it's some people experience it like they're like this hamster on a wheel. You're going through the motions, but you're not really present. You're not really, there's no joy left, right? So you're doing things mechanically, but you're not really, the essence of you, as Vanessa mentioned, is not there. Somehow you've lost that connection between you being present and really doing things because there's a level of joy. Now you might tell me, but I'm going to work. But I'm assuming at some point you did feel joy going into work and doing something that you felt productively doing. You are connected with it. You feel that you're really giving it and it's giving you back that energy. When you're reaching a point of burnout, you don't feel that energy coming back. You're going through the motions, but you're not really present emotionally, spiritually, physically. You're not really, well, physically you're there. The rest of you isn't. And I think this starts, so the losing of the sense of humor is one element, but there's the emotional bluntness, then the harshness of, as you said, but why am I feeling like this? Let me fix it. Where in reality, as you said, sort of needing to slow down, though, feels like very counterintuitive. How dare you tell me to slow down? There's so much that needs to be done. We almost go into that frame of mind where we feel like we're the only ones holding this very fragile, precious thing together. And if we were to slow down or to stop, it will suddenly come crashing down. In reality, though, what we know from even studies of high-performing athletes, rest has to be embedded within the routine of training in order to get high performance.
Crucial.
It's crucial. So unless we learn the self-love, unless we learn to speak to ourselves with self-compassion, unless we learn to say, you know what, you actually deserve a break, and no, you do not talk work whilst having your break, and move away from your desk and go and have a walk somewhere and then come back, because that actually is going to energize you and it's going to keep you going for longer.
Yeah.
Rather than plod through, write your emails whilst you're having a sandwich, because somehow you have this belief that by working more, you're going to get there. You're not going to get there. The reality of works nowadays, especially if you're working in a corporate environment, there's always going to be more to do.
Always.
So give yourself the break. Give yourself the permission to rest.
Yeah.
Because anyway, it's going to actually let you last longer.
It reminds me, what's coming to mind is like tortoise and the hare thing. And so many of us are in hare mode most of the time. So actually pushing the button on that, to take that pause that is very much needed, whether it be physically, mentally, both, feels it's so unnatural.
Alien.
Exactly.
But look at the tortoise, it plodded away and it got there. It didn't burn out, right?
Yeah.
I think it's important also to add to, the change in character is to understand what's going on physically to your body, right? And the only reason, like the stats that you read out earlier on, is because, women have a more fragile endocrine system, right? And this is also, it's so important, and I can sort of give also some advice to the listeners who might be going through the same, is understand how your body works. Yeah. Before you can take care of it, you need to understand what is going on. So those changes in personality comes from your adrenal glands, your whole body is in fight or flight. So you're pumping a large amount of stress hormones in your body. Mm-hmm. So now today, I notice when I meet someone after the first sentence, I notice if they have some form of adrenal fatigue from the tone of their voice even.
Whoa. Wow.
And that's why a lot of women, in very high positions, they come across as being angry and, they don't have a lot of patience. It's because this cortisol is pumping, the adrenaline is pumping, for them to be able to survive. So when we're in environments, stressful environments, our bodies as women are not made to be in those, let alone to thrive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So they start producing hormones that are foreign to our nature, our true nature.
Because on a physiological level, men generally, on average, have 15 times the amount of testosterone that a woman does.
And testosterone protects them. It doesn't protect us in unhealthy amounts.
Oh, I definitely want to dive into that a bit more. But Ashmi, when, you're talking about that emotional bluntness, did that start to, it feels like particularly Elaine, from what you've said, that it starts kind of this almost like vicious spiral of, then you notice that, but that's not who you really are. You're not an unkind person. And then you beat yourself up about that and you have judgment and self-blame. And was that your experience?
Yeah, I mean, I would say a big telltale sign which we haven't touched on is actually your own capability, not trusting that anymore, when self-worth and you were able to do something, and now the smallest of things when you're going through a burnout feels like, I don't think I can do that. I think that mountain is too high for me to climb. And when you keep that chipping away at your self-worth and knowing that you used to be able to do something and now you're like, I don't think I can, that is a huge telltale sign of burnout, where it really chips away at your feeling of self-worth. Yeah. And that's where the self-love comes in, because when you are burning out, probably your level of self-love is, your cup is just not full. You haven't looked after yourself holistically for a very, very long time, which is why you've reached where you have. Another point I wanted to say that though burnout happens at work, I have noticed that there is something personally, there may be something going on at home, there could be an issue in love life. There is a trigger that usually tips you over from just plodding through. So it feels like a collapse of all areas of your life together. So if it was just work stress, you'd keep plodding through. But something happens additionally, which then tips you over into like a burnout condition,
I had it described to me at the time as there's a boat. Your boat is like, your life is like a boat. And you put these things on and you've got work and you've got family or kids or whatever. And these things just keep getting put on, like you said in your journey. And at some point, there is going to be that one last thing that is going to sink that ship.
Yeah.
What was that for you, Ashmi?
I mean, it was a point of no return. I mean, like I said, I was here on a work permit and I quit one day to the next. I put my entire life on risk and burnout did that. I had no other choice. I just knew that going back into the office was just, I couldn't. And then I found the educational route and I invested in myself. I studied, I do art now. I coach women going through, all sorts of personal and professional issues from my own experience and learnings in the last year and a half. So I have found, this other ecosystem that I have created myself to sustain myself. Now I'm on an entrepreneurial path rather than sort of, running the corporate marathon. And we'll see where it goes. I've just started, but yeah.
And that's a really good point to focus on that, and something that you've said, Vanessa. Like, I think for all of us, we reached a point where something had to give. It was our health, but it also pivoted us, didn't it? It sent us on a different trajectory that, maybe you're still at the beginning of it. We're a little bit further down that path, but looking back, well, I certainly wouldn't change it. It's not what I would have chosen at the time. How do you feel about that, Vanessa?
Exactly the same. I think it was such a valuable part of my entire journey. And unlike you, I kept on. I kept going. I defied all my, guidance where they kept telling me, you have to stop, you have to stop. So I would, work, and then I would get home on a Friday and go to bed and wake up again on a Monday. So I was storing that energy and literally lie in bed. But that was the catalyst that then allowed me the time out from my social life, mostly because I had to sort of stop one or the other. So that was my first thing, was to understand all the tools that I needed, and that sort of led me down onto a more, because I started understanding that I was shallow breathing all the time. So breath work became a big thing, meditation, yoga, all these things that would slow me down and bring me back into my body, into myself, and into the present moment, right? I wasn't just reacting. I was understanding where I was and doing everything with a lot more care. And so, yeah, that was the beginning of my spiritual path. And I had a meditation teacher at the time. And when I told him, like, I need to quit my job, like, I'm dying, you know, this is kind of, I can't carry on. I'm so tired all the time. I just don't have a will to live, you know, and I love the work, you know, I'm creative. This is like the best platform I've ever had to really bring my creativity out. And he looked at me and he said, don't quit. He said, lose the ego and go back to work. Ooh. And when he said that, that was like a slap across my face, because I was like, I can't lose the ego. The ego is my armor, you know. And that's when, at that moment, I realized that work was beginning to be a bit of a battlefield, and that I had to go into this sort of place that was predominantly, you know, male-dominated and, you know, a little bit sort of patriarchal in the way it was set up. And so I felt like if I had to drop that armor, it was like going into work naked. Anyway, so I took the challenge on, and by that time I was, you know, really deeply into all my spiritual practices, all my self-care, and already my body was starting to respond in a more positive way. And so, yeah, this great challenge came upon me. So I started I went in and started to kind of treat everything that came my way in a completely different way that I was doing before. So I would do it with a heart-centered openness, you know. And lo and behold, you know, work became so much more pleasurable. The workplace changed as well, because my office became this sort of place where even, you know, my male colleagues would come in and sit down and they would feel comfortable, because I would always have some essential oil burning, and, you know, I always had herbal teas, and also because I started to share openly what was happening to me. And lo and behold, there were so many people going through the same thing.
And Elaine, with your clients, is that what you see in them as well? That there's an armor or there's an ego? Or
again, it depends, right? Everyone has a different situation. Sometimes you also have the situation, as Ashmi was saying, that it could be that people would have been absorbing so much from other situations in their life. It's not just work. I've had clients where things at home were not okay. It could be between the relationship between partners, or it could be situations with kids where kids are sick, for example, for a very long time. And therefore, these parents are absorbing so much there's so much anxiety, so much doubt whether the child is going to make it through, for example. You're going to work whilst at the same time you're dealing with that at home. So you're not going home and home is your happy, harmonious place. You're going home and home is a place of worry. And the body is absorbing this, the mind is absorbing this, and at some point, it's almost like a post-traumatic stress response, right? So in this case, it might not be an issue of ego as such as the body is now letting itself experience what it couldn't do before, because before you have to be rock solid and deal with so much, and now my body is crumbling. And I do need to put a caveat that, of course, in some situations, people are able to use a lot of alternative and I do believe a lot in the breathing work and meditation. And these are all things I would definitely recommend. There are also situations, though, where sometimes burnout has taken such a stage and such a hold where you might actually also need to look at clinical issues, right? I've had clients where, because the burnout resulted in subclinical or actual diagnosis of depression, for example, right. Again, how you treat that is different, and I wouldn't say that this is the right forum to discuss that, but definitely access help, right? Go to the right people, go to professionals and check out what you need. Because people sometimes are very scared, for example, of medication. Yes. This is not something which necessarily is going to be for the rest of your life, but there could be a moment where that medication for a few months or a year might be your lifesaver. Because unfortunately, when depression goes untreated, when burnout moves into you not even being able to get out of bed, caring for yourself, showering, eating well, where you've pushed away everyone around you, and you're moving into a very, very dark tunnel and dark hole, then sometimes this is the only way out, right? This is the only place where we can get you back out. So my suggestion would be, do not let yourself isolate yourself completely from everything. We can get back out.
And certainly among kind of my peer group, I've seen people get to that point and there's been resistance to take that type of help because, again, something we've touched on, it's seen as a sign of weakness.
Exactly.
What does that mean about me? Who am I if that's what I have to resort to? But, as you've said, it can be appropriate for even just a short time.
Yeah. It's funny how we're okay to take paracetamol if we've got a headache, right? So if it were a physical condition, if someone told you that you've been affected by this bacterial infection and antibiotics are your only way out because otherwise you might lose your leg, you would do it. But then because it's your mental health and you've come to a point where there could be a point of no return, we resist it so much. Again, there is this level of stigma. And unfortunately, it's that level of stigma to plod through which has led us there in the first place. Vanessa before was mentioning the issue perhaps of men and women, but I see a lot of men going through burnout.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Let's not just imagine that this is somehow, that they're somehow protected. They're not.
No.
There is also a lot of stereotyping that you should be this strong, that you're a man and therefore you should not be accessing mental health help, right? And I'm saying this because this could be your partner.
Yeah.
Right? This could be, or your dad, or your brother, right? And do not imagine, they might feel that they need to put a strong face because this is what society tells them that they should do.
Yeah.
And in my world, I meet a lot of men who are also going through, extreme phases of burnout where they need to take whole months off then from work.
Yeah. And have the self-judgment as well. So there's lots of help and alternatives kind of out there. Ashmi, what type of things what changes have you made? What's been of help to you personally? Because it's very individual, as we've said.
Yes.
And people like the alternative route. I tried both personally, like whatever works. Let's go. What have you found helpful?
Yeah, before we go there, I just want to talk a little bit about the whole idea of shame and silence around the topic of burnout. I myself, type A people get this and type A people don't like help. So even if it's burnout, it's like something they'll solve on their own. I'm a warrior. I've got this. I know my body. I don't need help from anybody. And I tried to do that myself. And in hindsight, I would urge anybody who's watching, who's feeling the symptoms we've discussed, to actually go out and get the external help, because it's been a very long journey for me to get here. And like I said, I wouldn't say I'm 100% recovered yet. So if I would change things, I would have actually gone to a professional who knew what was going on and could advise me. I would have got from point A to point B in my healing faster than I did. Regarding sort of shame and silence, there is a lot of masking around this topic. Everybody puts on an armor and just says, oh, I'm on a career break, and I'm just doing my own thing and figuring out what I need to do. Nobody talks about the symptoms and what they're experiencing to families, to friends. You don't want to appear weak because you've always been successful, and suddenly in your own eyes, you're a failure. So you mask it. So I would really urge individuals and companies. I had interviews last year when I was in the middle of all of this. I mean, someone who's gone through a burnout still needs a livelihood, you know.
Yep.
How can workplaces be more supportive if someone who has a, I don't know, C-level career decides consciously because of burnout that I'm actually going to choose something really simple to get myself back on track because I want the stability, I don't want the big money, I don't want the stress. And I mean, I went for lower roles and I admitted to having burnout in the interviews. And, people were just like, no, I mean, if you were a global brand lead, why are you going for project manager? Like, because they just assume you're going to leave in 3 months. So I think we need to change the conversation inside companies, inside institutions. How can the whole ecosystem support great individuals who've gone through a little bit of a blip or a big blip, let's say, and still need to be integrated back into work, into life, and uncover the shame really around the topic.
And be given those opportunities and allowed to take those opportunities, like you say, that they feel is most appropriate for them.
Yes, absolutely.
So what has worked for you? What have you tried? What is making a difference?
I'm really honoring myself, and touch wood, I'm in a place where I can take the time out. I can travel, I can experiment, I can write a poetry book. I'm writing about things, I'm talking about things, I'm going and seeing family, I'm doing the meditation, I'm doing a lot of journaling, I'm doing a lot of art. Like color therapy is fantastic for anyone trying to heal on this journey as well, because there is something about the way that, you just play with art. It's like your inner child after an experience like this needs to reclaim itself. And that's been really, really helpful for me personally. Eating well, sleep regulation, looking after yourself like you would a child, very compassionately, and bringing yourself back to life. You're a little sapling and you need to water yourself a little differently now, you know?
I love that. Oh my God. I've got this image of this little plant, like, wow.
It's true. And we don't do that to ourselves. We just run. We're not machines. We're human.
And it's that fragility again, going back to that fragility that's just makes everything so much more beautiful.
Yes.
In the nurturing.
While you were talking, what I kept thinking, and it resonates with me as well, but also it's there in the research, right? You lose the should.
Yes.
Just because we can do a lot of things doesn't mean we should or we need to.
Yes.
And I think, especially for us women, I'm a bit of a critique also of what we see around us, even on social media, on adverts. Just because you can go out from an airplane with white pants when you're on your period and parachute doesn't mean that you have to, right? So there is this idea that somehow, because it's available, then you have to pack your day, and you should be, again, you should be so many things. You should be the mom that has these. Last time I was seeing someone putting images of the lunch boxes that they're preparing for their kids to school, and she put this sushi rice, made it look like a panda. And I was looking at this picture and I'm like, I'm not going to obviously swear because it's a podcast, but there was a moment in my head where I was like, is someone seriously waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to make this lunchbox? Is this what you expect for me to have as a standard, for me to feel like a good mom, that my son, when he opens his lunchbox, he should see somehow these panda images, because God forbid, otherwise he wouldn't eat his lunchbox. No, I'm going to have a ham and cheese sandwich, with some crackers and some carrots. I mean, it's a healthy lunchbox, but it's not exactly 5-star.
Yeah.
I mean, you're getting an average healthy lunchbox. And in the same way, so all of these ideas that we're fed about these great things, these shoulds, that we should, somehow that we should be reaching these expectations and how we should be looking, and God forbid our hair is out of place. And, and what should I be wearing when I go to pick up my son from school? Yes, I'm wearing exactly what I was wearing when I was at home, because that's what I had and that's how I look. Or people who tell you these things that we're fed, like, oh, I can tell what type of person you are by the way you keep your car. If you had to look at my car at the moment, the number of juice boxes that are left inside of of it, toys, pieces of clothing. No, you cannot judge who I am by what you would judge is that I'm a very busy woman.
Yes.
And that I've got a life to run. But you do not make judgments on who I am as an individual, on whether, I can keep myself in good hygiene or not, because my car is definitely not a good representation of that. But we somehow have so many expectations that we should reach, that we're constantly fed this idea that you should be this amazing woman on all fronts. Nobody can live up to that. Certainly not on a daily basis.
And I wonder if the people that experience burnout, or actually so many women in general, have we really embraced that concept of good enough? It doesn't have to be perfect. As you say, you cannot. Is it even physically possible to be perfect in every area of life? What is good enough?
Exactly. So giving yourself the permission, okay,
Back to the permission slip.
Exactly. Like, good, this is what I was expecting, but in the life I'm living right now, I'm going to give you, again, a personal example. What I realized very early on, I think I must have been in my mid-20s and I was living on my own for the first time. I realized I was trying to be my mom and my dad both at the same time. I do not have a role model of a working mom. So I had seen my dad working very hard, working 2 jobs, being very productive. My mom was still very productive, but she was at home, right? She was keeping a very good, she kept us, well fed. The house always looked amazingly clean. Our clothes always smelled really, really nice. And obviously this is the picture that I had, that you have these 2 things happening. But when I found myself for the first time living with my partner, and we're trying to keep a clean house, we're trying to cook good food, we're both trying to work, I realized that I didn't really have a script on how to be a working, a person who works but also has a house to manage. And I struggled with that for quite a while, with these shoulds, because my house should look clean. The bed should be done before you leave from your house, because somehow this is always what I was raised to see. And there was a moment where it dawned on me that the bed will not know that it has not been made. Like, it's not like the sheets are going to suffer some sort of major breakdown if they haven't been made. And I meet a lot of people who tell me, no, the bed has to be done before I leave. And again, if that works for you, if it makes you feel better, go ahead and do it.
Yeah.
But the bed is not going to know. The bed has no feelings, right? So I would rather spend an extra 10 minutes having a longer coffee because I need it in order to prepare myself for the rest of the day. Let the bed not be done. Nobody's going to say anything bad about you. Again, because I haven't changed the sheets in 3 days, in a week, whatever is the norm for you. It's fine, you're not going to die.
Yeah.
So there are so many things that we sort of somehow have accepted to be the norm. But when you look really deeply into it, where does it come from? And can you just lower a little bit that, or, and just give yourself what is good enough?
Yeah.
It's fine if the bed has not been made.
Yeah.
It's fine if you left home and the sink is still full with bottles of milk and cups and saucers, and you'll get down to them that evening or the next day. Shh, nobody needs to know.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
And it doesn't say anything badly about you. It is not some sort of badge of honor that you need to carry, like, I've done all the dishes before I came to work. It's like, nobody cares.
I think something that really helped me reframe was like someone who was addicted to the hustle, or, really believed in it, really believed that success meant always doing, always being busy, always being 100% or 150, is the concept of intentional actions, which is, really doing a few things but doing them well and not doing the rest. Because a lot of the things that we commit ourselves to, we don't have to really do them. If you think about your life goals and break it down, there's probably 3 things you need to be doing today that are going to get you to the version of you that you want to be. Yeah. You just need to do those 3. Whereas we as women and as A-type women will do 80 and do them all at 150%. It's okay to do some at a 50%. It's okay to do some at a 40%. It's, the ones that matter, you'll do them well. But I think intentional actions instead of doing, busy, hustle, is really the way to do this in the right way.
And it's working smarter, not harder. I mean, how many times do you hear that? And this is, I think, one thing we all have in common is that we've moved out, and that we are in a really good place now. But, we're doing things differently. So it doesn't mean we're not achieving still as much as we achieved before. And we're all successful in our own right, but we're doing things differently in a smarter way.
If I may just add one small thing, what I've seen as well, and when I speak to other women, and I think part of my PhD was a bit of a project for me, perhaps to learn also from other women as to what worked for them. The most successful women I see around me are those women who are able to ask for help and know for what help to ask for. I think there's a very big distinction between getting emotional support and getting tangible support when you need it. And for anyone who's listening, when you tell your partner that you'd like to go, to have a workout because you'd like to start exercising, and you get, really good idea, babe, you should go for it. That's emotional support.
Yeah.
But when then it's 6 o'clock in the evening and your partner then says, yeah, I got this, the kid is with me, I'm going to cook pasta so you can go to have your workout, that is tangible support.
Yeah.
There's a huge difference between the two, because you go, babe, and it's a great idea, doesn't really get you out of the house.
Yeah.
What gets you out of the house and doing what you need to do is the tangible support that someone is there to take back that heavy load you've been lifting so that you can go and have your rest or your workout or whatever you need to do. So learn to ask for the support you need.
And do you see that? Because it's certainly something I've seen and maybe resonates here, but even if you can allow and you train yourself to start asking for help, which is one step, actually receiving and accepting that help is another step.
Oh, yes. Yes. And I'm sure all of us here would agree. Sometimes you need to realize, and it does sometimes as women, we are our own enemies, right? If you're not ready to accept the help, if you're not able to say, do you know what? It's okay for someone else to do that. I don't have to do it. They might not do it as perfectly as I would, but it's just good enough.
Yes.
Right? And I can then let go, accept the help, accept that I am in need of help and I deserve help, and I can go and do my hobby, my exercise, my whatever, it gives me rest and refuels me. Because this is a very big important element of avoiding burnout, finding activities that refuel us, that giving us back energy. If you're always going to be about your work and your family and nothing else, it's at some point you're going to feel like there's a lot of void, and that's, you're missing out.
And it's finding that joy. It's what you said earlier, Vanessa, that joy. I remember having a conversation with somebody, with a therapist at the time, and they're saying, I want you to intentionally find something that brings you joy every day. And my response was, every day? And I literally, my mind's like, oh my God, like, how are we going to do that? Every day? Like, really? Like, the irony of that wouldn't be a place that you're coming from.
Yes, you forget to laugh when you're going through this whole journey of burnout, is you forget what sparks joy, and joy is such a nurturing, beautiful kind of emotional gift you give to yourself. So yeah, and also because you're raising your vibration. So when burnout typically means that you're existing on a very low frequency, right? Besides all the physical things that are going through your body, the chemicals, that are, maybe at some point we can also talk about the physical symptoms so that people can start to recognize them. But so anything that helps you to raise your consciousness, raise your vibration, raise your frequency. So it's, the music you listen to, the food you eat, more wholesome food from nature, spending time in nature, looking at beautiful sceneries, things that, expand your vision. So most of us spend a lot of time looking at a screen or now a mobile phone. So things that just, allow you to breathe and to absorb the beauty of nature even. Could be anything, dancing. Whatever sparks that joy is the best medicine.
And what type of things do you do, Ashmi?
Yeah, I think it is about like reclaiming lost parts of yourself, because somebody who's going through a burnout has made their corporate identity their whole sense of worth, and that's why the burnout also happens. So it's a reminder to find all the other parts of you. When you were a kid, you used to like to write, you like to dance, you like to go for walks, you like to engage, it's all of the things that Vanessa said. Anything that gets you to that place in your heart that opens you out again, because you need to heal yourself, and only then can you go back into the workplace as a fuller person, as all of you, because I think people who go through this have forgotten a lot of parts. They've just become corporate robots,
Well, it's, as we said before, disconnection. You've
Yeah.
lost those or become disconnected from those parts of you and those parts of you that bring joy.
Yes.
And it makes you such a better leader as well. So, the more at peace you are, the more whole you are, the more you can bring that sense of inspiration and motivation, and you're leading from such a softer place. So, it's that turning or transforming the pain into purpose, understanding that there are incredible lessons within the whole of the experience, and then allowing it to soften you. And this is one big thing that a lot of us women sort of have difficulty in comprehending, that the power lies in the softness, that there is still so much power, so much female power that lies in having that softness. And that's when you see a fully integrated woman, who
And
is
I think-
successful.
Yeah, I mean, just to add to what you're saying, I think nobody should be afraid to do it in their own way. There's no template on healing from burnout, and we are our greatest intuitives, our greatest healers. I know what's best for me, you know what's best for you, And I think do it your way. Do it in a way that serves you, because your joy and your being and your soul and what you're meant to be doing in this world is very uniquely your DNA. So, follow your own Alice in Wonderland path to that healing and to that space, and really listen to yourself, I think.
And often what has got us to that position in the first place, certainly me and you, Vanessa, probably, is that what we were modeled was that leadership was being very male, being in that masculine energy, pushing. And it doesn't have to be like that. And I think what I'm witnessing, certainly with the leadership and the people that I work with, is that there is more embracing. There's more embracing of those softer qualities. I mean, I don't even like that phrase because there's an implicit kind of judgment in there. But that's where I am, and it sounds like you are seeing the most impact for women. Like you gave examples, tangible examples of people come into your office, even the guys, and being vulnerable. Brene Brown talks a lot about that, like the power in that vulnerability.
Yes. And I see it so much now. I mean, as a brand consultant now, I identify people with burnout straight away, and I'm always really careful to, pull them aside and sit with them and have a tea with them and kind of talk to them and talk about my experiences and, how there is a way out. But it's, it is the vulnerability and the opening up and the breaking down those shameful barriers. We're all human. Life is tough, We've never been asked to achieve so much, even just to stay alive.
To add to that as well, I am seeing a shift also in the type of training that people ask, even in leadership training. Right. So, for example, emotional intelligence. People have started to realize what an important asset it is in leadership, for example. And we are discussing concepts like empathy, like being able to communicate openly, assertively, but also with vulnerability, being authentic as a leader. So these elements, I feel, are transitioning into the jargon of workplaces. Maybe not everywhere, right? So you still have workplaces which do feel very toxic, for example. But I do meet a lot of leaders who tell me, look, I would like to have, I would like to bring our leadership team together, and we'd like to discuss, for example, around topics around emotional intelligence, around our authenticity, around our values, and how we showcase ourselves to our people. And that is such a breath of fresh air, right, that you're able to do that.
Absolutely. There was a leadership conference put on, actually called The Happiness Advantage by Shireburn kind of recently, that focused on exactly that. Like, how do we be better leaders by taking care of people more, embracing that, and not the fluffy happiness, but actually happiness is the new productivity.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I loved that, like that concept.
And it's not a cupcake,
Yes.
right? So having a happy workplace is not, let's bring cupcakes.
No, that's just
Okay.
cosmetic. I mean, it's not about the cupcakes.
Bring them if you like, but it means being sensitive that people need flexibility. It means realizing that people have complex lives aside from work, and that you need to acknowledge that and work with that, right? That is where the real...
And I think something that really happened after COVID is the shift to working from home. You can have Zoom calls, you can have video calls, all of that, but the isolation that comes from working from home also contributes a lot to burnout. And I think, yes, it's on the person who's experiencing it to ask for help, but it is also not just on HR, but on line managers to actively notice that, hey, this person's looking a bit off, seeming a bit off, not participating in meetings. Like, really listen to the signs. Everybody has a responsibility, not just the person who's experiencing the burnout,
We have to look out for each other.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And often we're better at doing that for other people than we are for ourselves.
Yes. So true.
So look out for others and ourselves as well. And Elaine, what are the type of things that we can do? Because ultimately we're talking about building resilience. What are the type of things that we can do to help ourselves?
I think it's important to remember that at every moment in your life, you can actually help yourself remaining in the best place that you can be. Of course, there will be moments where, as you mentioned with the ship, right, where things are just going to pile up a little bit, and there will be phases where you're faced with that. And you don't have to have the blame that you created this. So I don't want to mention resilience and people feel, oh, then I am causing the burnout because I am not resilient enough and therefore I am to blame, right? So this is not the discourse. But resilience means really, as we've been discussing, finding the places, finding those things that nurture you, that build you, and that give you that sense of inner strength to deal with the adversities of life. Life is going through phenomenal changes all the time, right? So even how you meet it mentally, if something has happened, do I look at it and say, okay, it wasn't what I was expecting, but in some way or another, I think I will cope with this? Or do I confront it and say, this is not what I wanted, and I'm rigid towards it? The two different approaches will mean how I'm going to experience that, and the experience I'm going to have is going to lead then to how I'm going to build up my reservoir of energy and whether I'm going to get burnt out or not. So it's on a cognitive level, it's on an emotional level, it's on a physical level. All the things you can do to take care of yourself is part of your resilience. There are though a couple of things. One thing which definitely... surrounding yourself by people that do mean you well, that actually can pull you back out, where you can have a good laugh, like you mentioned, that can remind you to find your joy, that can remind you in terms of your purpose and your actual original goal and whether you're still on it. Those people, keep them close to you. It's remembering what are your strengths. So in moments of great self-doubt, where you're thinking, I'm no longer capable of this, look at your strengths and find your evidence. Realizing that it's okay to quit. Okay, so realizing that it's okay. It's okay to quit. It's okay to say, this is no longer serving me. Whether it's quitting a relationship, whether it's quitting friends who are no longer serving you, who are should be no longer categorized as friends, or whether it is workplaces, like Ashmi was discussing. There is great courage in pushing away and saying, this no longer serves me. I've become a new person. I want to be on a different path. And, I'm pushing this away and I'm quitting this. So these are some of the things we can do in order to remain resilient. Then even as teams, the trust, for example, giving trust to each other, being there for each other, if it's in the workplaces, for example, that creates more resilient teams as well to confront situations at work. So these are just some of the examples that actually build resilience.
Really beautiful. And it follows on from what you were saying, Vanessa, about permission, isn't it? Yes. And that permission, or that knowing when to quit, oh, I think that, again, that could be a whole episode in and of itself. What's been the kind of the one thing or the few things that have been absolutely fundamental that have made the difference on your path to recovery, Vanessa?
It's definitely on a physical level I developed a huge passion for this, is regenerative health. It's how I regenerated my health, because you can bring yourself back. The body is a great healing machine, but we need to give it the right environment for it to thrive. So that's definitely my number one. And then after that is to make sure that you're still loving what you're doing. You know, this is a short life, and it's just so important that you love what you do. And generally, when we detach ourselves, you know, from who we truly are, we're detaching ourselves from our own true nature. And that also has a physical, mental, emotional effect on the body. So, you know, find the spark, find the joy, and make sure, question it, and don't be scared to change. You know, if you're not going down the right path, give yourself the permission slip to start questioning, to start seeking maybe other avenues that you haven't sought before. And also going back to trust and going back to community. I think, you know, we're a group of women here, is the sisterhood. Right? We've kind of lost the true meaning of the word sisterhood. And I think, you know, in the past, especially, things are really changing now. It's lovely to see what's going on. There's a lot more awareness. But us women were usually, or maybe we did it to ourselves, where we would pitch against each other, you know, and we would look at somebody in a role model, a female role model. And rather than saying, actually, she really inspires me, you know, she motivates me, oh my God, I want that, you know, and feeling from a place of joy, of how this woman is inspiring you. A lot of the times we feel kind of resentment, or we feel, you know, this hard-edged competition coming in. And that is what I think we all need to make sure we do, is to provide, you know, the element of support from women to women.
Yeah, and celebrate what those women are achieving, and know that if they can do it, then you can do it too. And that's what I really hope with this series that we're doing, that we're opening people's minds to what is possible by having women like you here sharing your stories and your advice and your tips. And Ashmi, what is and has made a really big difference on your path to recovery? You're still on it, as you openly shared.
Yes. I mean, I think for me, really developing your inner witness is a big one. So it's like watching the movie of your life, you know. Let's say you're sitting on the floor and you're in a bad spot. You're in a burnout, you're on the floor, you don't know how to pick yourself up. Like zoom out, like visualize this and literally zoom out and be the director of your own life and say, okay, so what should this character do now? What are the other areas that they can focus on? What would make them feel better? You know, learning to disconnect from your own emotions exactly during that burnout, and meditation and all of those tools help with that, has really helped me to sort of see it all differently and just say, this is an episode. This is one chapter in my life. This does not define the full book. And this just opens a blank canvas where you can paint it exactly the way that you want. And you've been given a gift of rewriting your life story in the way that you want it to, rather than what conditioning said, what your family said, what society expected you to, what your workplace thought your next role would be. Leave all of that behind, you know, take hold of your own story. I think having the courage to shut doors before new ones open is a big one for me. Having the courage to sort of slam doors shut, you know, like we talked about workplaces, we talked about toxic energy, in groups that we're in, you know, and something, you know, in your soul when something's not right for you. Learn to shut that door even if the next thing hasn't emerged yet. Be okay to be in the limbo. Be okay to be in the healing when you don't know what's going to happen next. You just don't know.
No, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes. I think that's helped me a lot. And pacing yourself, you know, everyone runs at a different pace. Some people in 2 months are on to their next gig. Some people need a more scenic route to recovery. I would say I'm one of those. Allow yourself that compassion and that grace, because it is all happening for you, not to you, as they say. You know, it's happening for your greater good. And you may not see it now, but in retrospect, you will, you know.
Yeah. And as an English cab driver once told me, tomorrow is the first day of the rest of your life.
I think that's a beautiful place to leave it. Ladies, thank you so much for being so honest and sharing your advice, your experience, your everything that you've been through. I think there's so much value in this episode. And if this has resonated with you, or you think this can help somebody that you love or you know, please do share this episode, because we're all just trying to be the best versions of ourselves, and this could make a real difference to somebody. So thank you, ladies. Let's cheers to recovery, to resilience, to emotional intelligence, everything we talked about today. Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers.